It's time to perk up your ears because in this review, we're going to listen to Soundbox from Horrible Guild Games. In this game, one player will play as the guesser and get to don these fashionable guessing glasses, while other players will be given a random number corresponding to a card. They will make noises relating to that card while the guesser listens and afterwards try to guess which cards people are making noises for. But of course, it's never that easy. Everyone will be making these noises all at once, so it'll be up to you to discern what's right, what's wrong, and why are you making such a weird squawking noise? Just a quick note, this is the Kickstarter edition. It has some special components these are wood versus cardboard and a couple extra cards, but the game mechanics are still the same. You will be working together to get this cute little guy all the way up to the crown before the heart goes down on this track and breaks at the end. To do so, each player is going to have to make sounds based on these cards, and one person, the guesser, will hopefully be able to interpret everyone and guess the right cards. Here's how it works. The guesser is going to put on one of these glasses after studying the cards available. Everyone else will pull a chip from this bag. They look like this. They have a heart symbol and a number referring to one of the available slots. Once each person has looked at their card and feel ready, you will flip over this 13-second timer to begin the round. Keep in mind for the sound makers, the noises you make cannot be actual words or recognizable tunes. To give you an idea of the chaos that ensues in a round, I think you should try on the guesser glasses. Clink, clink, clink. Fun noises, huh? The guesser now needs to take that whole cacophony and pull it apart to try to guess which sounds refer to which cards. I'll even give you a second to try to guess what possible sounds I was making during that time, and you can probably guess why I don't work in sound effects. When the guesser's ready, they'll point at a card. If someone actually has that guess, they'll show the token and the guesser will collect the card. This will keep going until the guesser is unable to guess any more cards or guesses one wrong. So in this case, these were the 4 cards in the sound effects: Farm, Breakfast, Cowboy, and Superpower. Now, let's say they were unable to guess the first 2, so Farm and Superpower, that would be 1 and 4. For each one not guessed, you lose the many hearts on the symbol. So 1 has 1 heart, 4 has 1, 10 has 2. So if they guess 10 wrong, it would hurt more. The heart moves down that many broken hearts. If it ever hits the bottom, your group loses. Now, for each card you guess correctly, so let's imagine that you got all 4 correct, you move up that many spaces. So 1, 2, 3, 4. What happens is for each token you reach, you're going to take them and add them to the bag. This means the next time that you fill up, you're going to add not only to the cards that were taken for guessed correctly, but also to the new slots, adding a whole lot more possible options that can be guessed. Keep in mind, cards are double-sided, and in case you're curious, the star means that it's a more kid-friendly side, so if you're playing with a younger audience, that's a way to make sure that all the sound effects are either themed appropriately or you remove some of the more harder abstract ones. For example, like smart working. Anytime you hit these 2 pieces, this has to go to another player who's currently not the guesser. That person will have to draw a second token, meaning they're making sounds for 2 cards. Now, if your heart ever goes below the symbols here, you actually remove those from the game, regardless if you've met them or not, as they're sort of a way to balance out difficulty if you're doing too good or your health is dropping too fast. If you're able to reach all the way to the end without losing too many hearts, then your group has won the game. If not, well, start a new one or just keep going. This is a party game after all. Now, there is an extra rule for if you have 6 to 7 players, someone else is going to put on their own pair of glasses, and that player becomes the recorder. Pretty much their job is to repeat any noises to help the guesser guess some cards if they're like, can you say some of those sounds again? But they're pretty much like just another way to fit more people without making too many people shouting out sounds and making it almost impossible for the guesser. So full disclosure, this is actually an additional recording I made after the previous one because I completely forgot to actually mess around with the app. This is a web page that has a timer, and this can be used if you don't like the sand timer. Personally, I'm only worried about that if there's a game where the sand timer is going while you're usually rolling dice, moving pieces, so you can't keep your eye on the sand timer. But because you're just making noise, it wasn't the kind of thing I was too worried about. But it's still worth bringing up here because there are advanced modes. These advanced modes pretty much are like little modular rules, and it was enough that I probably should have tried these out first before I released the review, which is why this was supposed to come out Friday, but I had to push it until I can get another play group again to try out these 3 modes. Now, they are small things, so it's not too crazy. The first one is random timer. Pretty much instead of the normal 13 seconds, it could be either from 8 to 15 seconds. It really doesn't add too much in there, maybe a little bit of chaos, but even with the shorter times, we never felt like we were too pressured to get whatever noises we need to get across, unless maybe you had 2 sound effect cards you had to do. The next one is distraction. This one's a little bit weird. It adds some random sound effects, but because you can sort of tell that it's the foam one, usually it was the kind of thing that you could block out if you were the guesser. I feel this one has its own separate difficulty because instead of being like the kind of thing you get confused about, the louder you make it, be it your speaker or phone, the more distracting in terms of covering up other people's noises. So if you choose to play this module, really decide based on the volume, because that could just make it so you only hear the phone versus hearing the other players. It could be a whole different way for you to increase difficulty if you find this game too easy. Finally, there's heartbreak. What this does is when you hit the timer, there may be an alarm that goes off, meaning that for each wrong answer you get, you're going to lose more hearts going down that track faster. Personally, not one that I love because I feel I'm challenged enough and get things wrong as it was. And for me, I'm more excited not about beating the heart track, but rather hearing all the different sounds. That said, if you feel like you are able to reach the end way too easy without losing too many hearts, this could be a way to punish you from getting too cocky. Obviously, if you couldn't tell, this is a party game, and this definitely falls along the lines of charades, where a lot of the fun's not going to be coming from, all right, we got to think this mechanically right, we got to do the most efficient path, and more along the lines of hearing someone oink and laughing at their weird noises. Now, the cacophony can be a little hard at times, but I did notice in our play groups, we actually naturally, not even trying to game, we didn't notice that sometimes people would quiet down to let other people make noise and then they'll speak up. So it wasn't actually as bad as I thought. And I'm the kind of person who, if there's multiple conversations going on, I'm sort of going to zone out because I can't really lock onto one. I didn't feel as nearly as bad here, partially because maybe you're expecting this. And also, as long as everyone's not trying to shout over each other like crazy, because everyone just wants to be heard, regardless of how bad their actual impression is, it seems to work out pretty well on that front, at least for me. Now, with a lot of these party games, one of the things that can happen is these words, you start seeing the same words over and over. And while that is possible, after some playthroughs, I do recognize some of these words. Like I said, these cards are double-sided, and it's so easy to just, if you've seen it, be like, oh, we've seen this card a lot before. Just there you go. That is something that, it's not in the rules, but it's a party game, and maybe for me at least, when something comes to a party game, I play a bit looser and do whatever it takes for the game to still be fun rather than lock in. That also goes same for the heart track. I'm going to be honest, we've mostly lost, or at least more often. But what tends to happen is once we lost, we're like, oh, let's just try one more and see if we can get it. And I think that's fine. That's not really even it can be a bit of a miss. You become this super gamey, but I don't think that's what it's going for. It's blaming Love Letter for not being a 3-hour long game. It's doing what it was designed to do. So that in itself is not a miss. One thing that did come up that I would consider more of an issue tended to be when you had a lot of cards that would fall under a very close theme. For example, lifeguard, go and flip this back over, like Little Mermaid Beach, like a lot of ocean themes. And what happened is if someone got a card, they felt really bad. Like, I feel like the noise would be like wave sounds I'm going to try and do, but like that goes to so many other cards. Now, some may say that's some of the fun and difficulty. The problem is it sort of gets a little annoying if that's where a lot of people keep tripping up and the guesser just can't differentiate between like, oh, the subtle difference between the mermaid and the beach. Now I see what you're getting, because that happened a couple times. It's one of those things where I would highly suggest, if you notice that coming up, going back to what I said before, maybe flip over a couple of them to give you a bit more variety. Now, as for these plus and minuses, it wasn't actually too bad to have more than one sound. It's a little weird, especially if you have some of the more abstract ones, but it wasn't something, it was a good catch-up mechanic, I guess, is the way to design. One other big important thing I want to mention now is there are plenty of party games out there, and one of the bigger flaws I see in some of them could be downtime. This is even more offensive in a party game, as the idea of a party is everyone is involved. I feel this does a good job of making sure everyone's doing something. If you're not the guesser, then you are in charge of a sound. So you have to think real hard, how can I possibly make sure this person gets smart working or woods? You are really focused on that. And if you're the guesser, you're the only one. So you really need to differentiate, pull apart the different noises coming at you and like, oh, that's an owl. That has to be an owl sound. So what can I remember from that? Or if I hear like, okay, that sounds more, well, going to the beach theme thing, it sounds like a wave, I should keep water in my mind. So when the cards are out and you get another chance to look, you can be like, oh, of course, that could be that can be that. Now, there are some cards that fall more into the first thing, but I think they're only part of the Kickstarter one. I haven't actually looked through a regular one, so I can't say for certain, but like I do find some cards like, for example, Seven Samurai Back to the Future, do make sure before you start a round that everyone knows what those things are. Sure, it could be funny if someone makes like Donkey Kong and everyone's like, everyone knows who Donkey Kong is, one person doesn't. To me personally, I feel like that tends to make that person feel more embarrassed that they don't know a property. And I'd rather catch that before the round starts. That way it's more fun when everyone at least has a shot. Crits and misses for Soundbox. Crits. The game does a good job to make you engaged no matter what your role is. You are highly focused on what sound or sounds you have to make, and if you are the guesser, because you are blindfolded, you have to really focus and try to pick out certain sound cues that can lead you to the right card. I never really felt there was a downtime for me. I felt I was always engaged with the game, which I find to be important for any game, but in particular, party games. There are a ton of cards and all of them are double-sided. This means it's really unlikely for you to come across the same cards over and over. In addition, for younger audiences, they've added stars on some of the cards, meaning they're either easier or more age-appropriate to make sure the game is fun for everyone. Misses. For me, the worst time playing this game occurred when there were many cards of the same theme on the board. What tended to happen was one person would get one of those cards, make noises for that, and the guesser unfortunately couldn't differentiate between all of them and would guess wrong. Wrong guesses stay on the board, so unfortunately, we would just constantly have these cards on the board. I would highly suggest that if this situation comes up, maybe give it a go once, but maybe swap some of them out afterwards just for the sake of getting a breath of fresh air. Party games are meant to be light and less about the rules and more about the experience, and Soundbox is not an exception. It is designed to be very light, you're making a lot of little noises, and I think if you focus on just the heart mechanic and be like how to emphasize it, like many party games, you probably won't have as much fun. If you focus more on all the silly noises people make, laugh at when someone makes a really random noise for something when they try to get in a hard card, I think you're going to have a lot more fun. This game does go up to 7 players, but for the 6 and 7, you add the recorder job. I believe it's recording or recorder. I always mix it up, where they repeat, and it's not bad. But honestly, I think this works best in a smaller group, the 4 to 5. So again, not small like small, but like not having that extra role. I think it's perfectly fine with just the one person blindfolded and everyone making the noises. The Kickstarter edition is a lot cute. And, as someone who just loves nice components, that's always a plus. I think the extra cards, though, would be the bigger draw, even though some of them are the named things. Yes, I told you to be careful and make sure everyone has a general idea. And remember, the sound maker cannot make recognizable sounds. So if you get a very obvious TV show, you can't just hum the theme song. That said, if people generally know them, they tend to be really funny when someone tries to make the right noises to guess them, or when someone actually does an amazing job at doing some of the sound effects for the show. For example, Star Wars, we had some amazing lightsaber sound. That said, if this is not your cup of tea, I can get it. Like I mentioned before, usually with conversations, I have problems and can get distracted if multiple people are talking or if there's a loud TV in the background. This can have that same kind of effect, but it's still going to be the kind of game that I think I highly recommend, especially even if you hit bottom, you just play just to see people make noises. This fits that kind of party game with charades where you're going to have fun just seeing everyone act. And I think for me, that's where the enjoyment came from, not winning or losing, or not even seeing how far we went, but just hearing what weird noises came out of everyone's mouth. Let me know in the comments if you backed this or if you picked up a retail version. What are your thoughts on this? Is this the kind of party game you enjoy? Do you just not like party games in general? Or is there something about certain party games that makes them better over others? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this down below. Until then, I'm Will, and this has been Roll for Crit.